Okay, well, it's 1 minute after 1, so I'm going to go ahead, and it looks like from what I see on the Zoom that we have hopefully enough folks to get the meeting started. So I'm going to call the roll call. Eddie Taylor,
Here.
Danielle Sidnor, Stephen Cavanis,
Here.
Heidi Gullett,
Here.
Randy McShepard, Habiba Grimes,
Here.
India Pierce Lee,
Here.
Phyllis Harris,
Here.
Reverend Kenneth Chalker,
Here.
Rabbi Joshua Caruso,
Here.
Levine Ross,
Here.
Yanela Sims,
Here.
Victor Ruiz,
Here.
Randy McShepard, did you join?
Yes, here.
And members Cordell Stokes, Marcia Maccabee, and Sheila Wright are all excused. They've sent email correspondence that they would not, unfortunately, be able to attend today's meeting. So we do have a quorum. Oh, I'm sorry, and I didn't mention, I don't know how, Janice Contreras? Is Janice with us? Okay, so Janice is not here as well, but fortunately, we still do have a quorum. For a moment of silence and reflection, I'd like to take a moment to reflect upon the life of Tara Nolden. Tara is a 36-year-old mother of 7 from East Cleveland who was hit by a car and killed on Euclid Avenue and Stanwood Road on the evening of December 30th, 2019. At the time, she was walking to a nearby hospital to check on her daughter, who had bumped her head and received stitches. There used to be a traffic light at the intersection where Miss Nolden lost her life. However, the Ohio Department of Transportation removed the light in November of 2019. In 2012, the Ohio Department of Transportation determined 31 of 49 traffic signals in East Cleveland were not necessary and wouldn't qualify for federal funding, so they were removed. The one removed at Euclid and Stanwood Avenue was deemed important by the state, but was removed in November of 2019 with a plan to replace it in the spring of 2020. In January 2020, the mayor of East Cleveland and Governor DeWine held a press conference to address the lack of traffic lights and address the need to improve safety and economic development in East Cleveland. In response to the tragedy, the Ohio Department of Transportation also expedited having the new light installed. Let's take a moment of silence in memory of Tara Nolden and other Black residents who have died due to a lack of infrastructure resources in predominantly Black neighborhoods. Thank you. I'd also like to take an additional moment of silence to offer condolences to Member Maccabee on the recent loss of her beloved husband, Deacon James F. Maccabee. Marcia and James married in 1969 and had 2 adult daughters. Deacon Maccabee was not only a leader in the faith community, but also a Purple Heart veteran who served as a peer support advocate for the post-traumatic stress disorder group with the Cleveland VA Medical Center. Additionally, Deacon Maccabee supported his wife's work with the Urban League as an active urban leaguer and attended national conferences and events all over the country. Services for Deacon Maccabee were held this past weekend. The family has asked that in lieu of flowers, contributions be made in memory of James F. Maccabee to the Cleveland VA PTSD support group. Please know our thoughts, our sympathies are with Member Maccabee and her family through these very difficult times. Again, let's just take an additional moment of silence. Thank you all. Before we move further, I noticed on the Zoom call that Danielle Sidnor has joined. Danielle, are you with us?
I am with you.
Thank you. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good, thank you. Public comment. Since our last meeting, numerous comments were submitted to the equity@cuyahogacounty.us email address. I have forwarded those comments that I received as of Friday, October 29th at about 1:30 p.m. Since that time, we have not received any additional public comment. I am not going to take the time now to read the ones that I previously forwarded because they are voluminous. But please note that members of my staff did acknowledge receipt of each comment to this appropriate sender. At this point, I'll turn the meeting over to Cuyahoga County Executive Armin Budish. Executive Budish, would you like to open the meeting with any comments?
Sure. Thank you, Nayla. Thanks
Sure.
again for everybody being on this call. It's good to see you all, albeit virtually. I want to say, first of all, that I know that there's been a lot of activity since your last meeting and that you're all putting a lot of work into this very important effort. So thank you for that. And I know that that's all on top of your full professional and personal lives as well. When I called each of you to join the case group, I knew that you were all busy, and yet not one of you hesitated to agree, even though you knew it would be a significant time commitment, and I appreciate that as well. One of the Equity Council's charges is to engage our residents in conversation around racism, and the week before last, you all did just that, working with the Cleveland Foundation and using the Common Ground platform. We were able to host 3 separate facilitated conversations. We had around 200 participants in the discussions, not including facilitators or scribes. I've heard from a number of people that these conversations were impactful and meaningful. I know that we're gathering the notes from the scribes as well as a survey that was sent after the conversations, and that all of that information, after it's gathered, will be forwarded to Dean England at CSU. The Dean has generously agreed to compile the notes and key themes from these conversations. I look forward to that report and to learning about other ways that CASE is going to be reaching out to the community. It's just so important that we get as much input as we can. I also know that you've been working hard to interview leaders in the county government, as well as some of our partners, so that you can better understand the issues of diversity and equity within the county. This is also very important work, and I know that it's time consuming, but again, I appreciate what you're doing because it is so important. If we're going to get this right, we need to have the right input and the right data to make meaningful change. So once again, I thank all of you, and I appreciate your work, and I look forward to this meeting and discussion.
Thank you, Executive Budish. I'd also like to note that I do see from the Zoom that member Marcia Maccabee has joined. So I would like to welcome member Maccabee to our call. Again, member Maccabee, I would like to just take a moment and again extend my sincere condolences on your recent loss. But I do see that Marcia is on the Zoom call. Chair Taylor?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Of course, absolutely. Chair Taylor, would you like to address the council?
Yeah, thank you as well. And thank you, Marcia. If you at any point want to offer any comments, certainly feel free to do so, but it's also understandable if you just want to observe. Marcia and I have talked at length, and I'm sure many of you have spoken with her as well. And she obviously is enduring this difficult time. And on top of it, takes some time away from a lot of the activities that she's involved with in the community, including taking a step back with respect to the chairmanship of one of our subcommittees in her stead. And I'm sure Steve will agree. It's hard to replace the efforts and the understanding, the wisdom of Mrs. Maccabee, but Stephen Cavanis is determined that he has the time and the willingness to step in as a chair. So we will look forward to hearing from him in just a moment. Marcia, anything before we move on? And again, feel no obligation if.
Chair Taylor, I'm absolutely honored to share some comments. And the first thing I want to do is to thank you for all of your support, all of the team, Naila, everyone, for the wonderful support that you extended to me And it is because of all the prayers and support that I've received that I'm yet standing today. And I am so thankful. I know that Stephen will do a great job in moving our committee forward. And Stephen, thank you so much for stepping up to the plate on that. And I'm going to be taking some much needed rest. This past year has really taken more out of me than I even realized until I was able to sit down and exhale for a moment. So I look forward to, continuing to move forward and get myself ready to get back in the saddle and be fully present and helping in any ways that I can on this important effort, as I know it'll be going forward. Hope to help with the final report in December if there's any place that I'm needed. And I look forward to rejoining you as soon as I'm able.
Thank you, Marcia. And I'm sure everyone agrees. And once again, wishing you the very best in health as you begin to heal. I want to thank each and every one of you as well. As the county executive mentioned, between common ground discussions and now these subcommittee conversations, I've seen a lot of you, and it's been good work, great effort, and I know lots of productivity has also reigned in many of these conversations. So I do thank you. Thank you as well to the county executive. A couple of weeks ago, through the good work of Naila and Eliza Wing within the county, we were on a call together with Kevin Clayton from the Cavaliers as the sports teams deal with their Team Up for Change efforts. And the county executive made what I thought were great comments. I'm not sure how wide the audience was, but it was certainly widespread in terms of the communication itself to, as I mentioned, those who follow the Cavs. So this work continues. It is stretched in a number of different ways. On top of it, that call included the mayor and the police chief of the city of Cleveland. So again, folks are putting the right level of effort into this. That effort will and should grow over the course of time, but my heartfelt gratitude is to each and everyone on this call for the volumes of notes taken and the immense amount of time you've all contributed. So the best update I can provide at this point is save as much time as possible for the new business, and that's all those subcommittee report outs. More to come, and I want that to be a dialogue-filled conversation. And then you'll see after we get through the unfinished business, we're going to hear from Dr. Hovman on this mapping. So thank you once again, Victor, for bringing the thought to our minds. And thank you, Heidi, for helping this come to fruition, at least at this very early stage with Peter. And I'm excited to share, as I'm sure Heidi and Peter are, with where we are from a preliminary standpoint. So a great deal of activity, things are in motion, but as they say, not only is the best ahead, but a great deal more work is ahead, because at some point we have to reduce all of this good effort to writing on a preliminary basis. And I keep hedging by calling it preliminary because this document will evolve and grow and change over the course of time. But we find ourselves now a month and a half away from the first version of this effort in writing. So I just want to remind everyone of that before we get to the bottom of this discussion. Naila, if you want to take us through, unless you have a guest to take us through the unfinished business, we will start there and then proceed to the subcommittee reports. Naila, you're on mute.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to take a moment to introduce Assistant Law Director Andrea Nelson Moore. Ms. Nelson Moore is going to be our new liaison or lawyer that's been assigned by the law department to work with this council. Ms. Nelson Moore is a lifelong resident of Cuyahoga County, and she is a dedicated public servant. Andrea is a graduate of Cleveland Heights High School, Baldwin Wallace College, and Cleveland Marshall College of Law, and currently is in her 21st year of legal practice. She's been an assistant law director with the county law department for 3 years, where she is currently a member of the litigation, open meetings, public records, and constitutional charter statutory issues practice group. Ms. Nelson's more professional experience includes service as a former assistant county prosecuting attorney for Cuyahoga County Prosecutors Criminal Division. She was a staff attorney for the Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court. She was a criminal defense attorney, and I had the privilege of hiring Andrea as a Deputy Inspector General for Cuyahoga County when I was the Inspector General. She's also worked as the Fair Housing Coordinator for the City of Cleveland. Andrea, welcome to our council, and I'm going to hand this over to you now to provide an update on where we are with the bylaws, as well as the members' terms, and an explanation on the public meeting requirements. So, Andrea?
Thank you, Clerk Byrd, for the wonderful and kind remarks. I truly appreciate all of your words of support and your confidence in my ability to support this council. To Chair Taylor and the entire council, to County Executive Budish, good afternoon. As Clerk Byrd indicated, I am Andrea Nelson Moore, and I have been assigned as the County Law Department's representative, and I've been tasked with providing legal support for the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity. I consider this assignment both a privilege and an honor. And I promise not to take up too much of your time, but I would like to give you a brief update on a few items listed on the agenda. First, as you all are now aware, County Council amended the ordinance addressing the conflicting language surrounding members' terms on the case. The enacting legislation provided for appointment to the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity originally stated that the council would be appointed once every 5 years with members' terms ending after a year. Over the past couple weeks, County Council revisited the issue and acted to address the conflicting language. The newest ordinance includes language more consistent with council and the county executive's intent of making sure that equity and inclusion efforts in Cuyahoga County are ongoing, as opposed to being addressed once every 5 years. This was explained in an email I believe each of you received from Director Pomerantz, reflecting the staggered terms of the county executive appointees on the council. Specifically, 5 members were assigned to 1-year terms, 5 members were assigned to 2-year terms, and 5 members were assigned to 3-year terms. The county council's appointee will serve a 3-year term. As I understand it, the ordinance was passed last Tuesday, October the 27th, under suspension, and there are no additional actions that are required of the appointees. Are there any questions on the term clarifications?
A couple of things. Thank you, Ms. Nelson Moore. First of all, this change seems relatively perfunctory to me, right? It makes sense. This is not an exquisite change to the ordinance. This is one of those changes that just is practical because you want folks to have overlapping terms. So on that front, I am perfectly okay with it. I also just want to be clear, though, that, and I think the language speaks to it, that a person who serves a 1-year term or is in this current class or cycle, if you will, can be reappointed if they so desire to be up for reappointment or election and the county council says yay to them. So it's not as if it's a 1-year and done proposition for those individuals. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, so I just want folks to be clear on that so that you don't have an easy way out. There is no escape route, at least not after 1 year, unless you desire not to continue to participate. Yeah, I knew the smiles would come with that escape route because some of you are already seeing the exit sign, but no, we can't make it that easy on you. And then the other thing is for the appointees by council, they can serve a 3-year term. Are they also up for reappointment if it is desirous of the council and those individuals?
Unfortunately, I don't have that information and I haven't spoken with council's legal appointees, but I will make sure I address that and I can get that information back to Clerk Byrd, if that's all right with
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Taylor, if I could just add one thing.
Yes, sir.
I just want to note that the assignment of people to the different terms, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, is not reflective of any decisions whatsoever, not reflective of any ratings, or it's strictly random. So Everybody who's on the council is valued, and as you said, we can reappoint people as we go forward.
Thank you. I think I would have, I'm not even going to make that joke. We can move on. I was going to speak to my randomness in 3 years and not 1 year, but we're good. Thank you, County Executive, for that clarification. All right, Ms. Nelson Moore, are there other items?
Absolutely. And I think this is a great place to segue into the updates on the bylaws. So I've worked with Clerk Bird and her chief of staff for a little over a month now on the bylaws. And we had hoped to get them out for review a few weeks ago, but because of the conflicting language on membership terms, it was pushed back. However, as I just indicated, since the ordinance has been passed, it was passed last week, we were able to address the conflicting language and update the term section of the bylaws. And I believe if they have not already been, they will be forwarded to you for review and adoptions. At this point, I'm satisfied they are compliant with the Open Meetings Act requirements. So unless there's any additional input from the council, you guys are free to have at the bylaws. Are there any questions concerning that?
So
Well,
Andrea, before, they have not been circulated yet because you and I just spoke this morning about finalizing that one issue. So they will be circulated before the end of the day today to the council members. Just wanted that point of clarity.
And the question becomes, are we in a position to say yay or nay to the bylaws if we're even provided that opportunity outside of one of these public discussions, or is the bylaw ratification left to a different body and or a different time?
You know, that is an excellent question. I need to take a look at that. But I would, I'm sorry.
And I was just going to say, I would rather have the opportunity to actually read the finalized document first before ratifying, if that's an option.
I don't see why that would not be an option. And I think the safer bet would certainly be to ratify them during a public meeting. But that too, I will also check on and forward the information to Clerk Bird.
Great, thank you.
And finally, there was one question, as I understand it, that one of the members had prior to me joining as the legal representative, specifically about public meetings and whether they can be conducted virtually. And specifically with the Open Meetings Act, there's one section of the Ohio Revised Code that requires members of a public body to be present in person at a meeting, and the meeting be open to the public to be considered present or to vote at a meeting for purposes of determining whether a quorum is present at the meeting. However, the General Assembly may address and change the physical presence requirements as they did with the COVID-19 pandemic. As I had indicated to Clerk Bird, HB 197 permits public bodies to have virtual meetings with their members attending virtually. So the members, of course, are not required to be physically present to be counted towards a quorum or to vote on matters considered, so long as there is a means providing public access to the proceedings. So that's why we're able to do so currently at this moment. That is only because there was legislative action. So the case is permitted to continue meeting virtually. As it stands, Governor DeWine has issued his public emergency requisite, and until he rescinds it, or December 1st, unless the General Assembly acts, at that point, the case will be required to meet physically. We don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic, so it could be amended by the General Assembly. But as of right now, the ability for the case to meet virtually will go up through December 1st. And as of right now, there have not been any changes to that.
And I think, Andrea, to that point, I think it would be fair to assume that the governor and in conjunction with the interim director of health will extend that December 1st deadline. Would you agree with that based on the current situation with the pandemic?
Based on what's currently occurring with the pandemic and the uptick in the numbers of cases, I would suspect that they are likely going to extend that deadline. But as of right now, they haven't.
Okay. Are there any additional questions for Andrea Nelson-Moore on anything that she's talked about or any other items? Okay, Chair Taylor, should we move on?
We should move on, and we have committed the better part of an hour to this next portion of the agenda. We will want the conversation to be full and complete and as I mentioned earlier, productive, but we'll also try to keep ourselves on schedule to get through this in the next, we'll call it 60 to 65 minutes or so. Again, questions are desired, especially if you are hearing some things for the first time, meaning you're not on a particular subcommittee. But I couldn't say it more often or more proudly that the work that's gone into not only the common ground work, beginning with Phyllis, as one of the first committees to get going, to all the good work that Randall put together in thought and writing to bring us down to these, to reduce our thinking to these 4 subcommittees, and then everyone, India and your committee, Heidi, your committee, Stephen now, the committee, and the good work started by Marcia. So I couldn't be prouder. And over time, we'll list everybody by name, but we'll start with the folks who are taking on these roles to sort of drive us to a good place. And with that, I think first off will be Phyllis, so if you don't mind. And here's what I would say as well. Everyone on these subcommittees feel no restriction or hesitation of offering your own thoughts, even if they disagree with your committee chair as we go through these discussions, because this is the fullness of what this work should be about.
Before we turn it over to Phyllis, Chair Taylor, would you like me to give some sort of statistical information around the community conversations and what we did? Okay, in Common Ground. So,
unless you're stealing Phyllis's thunder.
Phyllis, will I be stealing your thunder if I do that?
I think you might have more updated. I have updated information as of our last meeting. So if you have more updated information, that would be great.
Okay, and I probably do. So since our last public meeting, as we all know, the case held 3 community conversations, and we did that to gather feedback from the public regarding structural racism. The events were held on Friday, the 23rd of October from 11 to 12:30, Saturday, the 24th from 12 to 1:30, and Monday, the 26th from 7 to 8:30. For Friday, we had 249 people registered for the event. However, unbeknownst to us, the day of the meeting, the IT department at Common Ground had made a change to the organization's Zoom account, and that change limited the capacity to only 100 participants. However, the good news out of that is that the issue was fixed for subsequent discussions. But the better news is that the feedback we received from both our internal partners who participated in the community discussions was quite positive. The scribes, the facilitators, and the participants all expressed that the small groups allowed for the participants to voice their feedback and to have more informed discussions, which were both very productive as well as comprehensive. For Saturday and Monday, we had 161 and 219 people registered, excuse me. Unfortunately, though, attendance for both of those days was lower than we anticipated. The public attendees for those 2 days was 73 on Saturday and 87 on Monday. But again, we received positive feedback regarding the group conversations and the number of participants in each room. We were told that because the numbers were low, It fostered engaged dialogue and fruitful discussions. The information gathered by the scribes for all 3 sessions will be provided to Dean Anglin at Cleveland State. He has graciously agreed to assist the case with data analysis. To date, we have approximately 80% of the scribe notes have been returned to us. However, my office is in constant communication to remind the scribes who have not yet provided notes to please submit them. Once all of the notes are submitted, I will forward them or make sure someone forwards them to member Victor Ruiz, who has graciously agreed to coordinate with the dean on transmission of the notes. Additionally, the County Communications Department is gathering the post-event survey responses, which will also be shared in part with Dean Anglin. Chair Harris, that's all I have in terms of the background and some of the data. So I will now turn it over to you to do a more thorough report.
Thank you. That is beautifully presented in terms of summation of the experience that we had. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And so while we are continuing to get information in, and this information is being sent to Dean Anglin, we are still working with. There were still some learnings that we have that we can continue to work on. And that is, so what did we learn? We learned that many of the individuals who did make the call were older. And so that we may be missing out on the youth voice. And so as a committee, we are committed to getting to our outreach efforts around getting to young people, youth-led organization, youth development experts who have their finger on the pulse of what's happening with young people, and getting us to them to be able to hear their voices. So we have a robust list of organizational partners that we have connections with, and we think we're going to be successful with allowing for young people to get their voice in. We will be modifying the questions. One of the things that we learned is the first question of the 3, which asks folks, we stated that we know that Black and Brown community members are impacted by racism, and we wanted to know for them as a resident how their family, how themselves were impacted. And so that got the most exchange. And as a scribe, I mentioned to my committee members, it was really impactful to just take time to listen and listen to how individuals are connecting to how racism and structural racism within organizations, workplace, services have impacted their lives was truly humbling. And I think we'll find in this report that, our work is cut out for us, but we can get it done. Other things that we learned is it's going to be important, as we all know, to be transparent. And so how we want to do that will require that we're paying attention to the website that we are building with information, and that we will that we need to use, to date, easy to access multimedia tools to get to folks. So ideally, the goal would be that around communications is that it's reciprocal. So we are making efforts to give information and to get information, and vice versa. So I think we're headed in the right direction. We're very busy with the meetings or the engagements that we have. We're working in a way that I think is synchronistic. You heard about how the common ground, like the community conversations have gone. You see that Executive Buttigieg knows this information, Chair Taylor knows this information, Aila can give an excellent overview of how we're working. We're learning and growing together. And I'm the cheerleader, if you will, of the Communications Subcommittee. And we are being serious about our outreach and our efforts. So our next focus will be youth voices and our partners, updating our website with current information and user-friendly information. And then there was one other thing in my 3s, using multimedia tools and ideas where folks can use their own resources to give us information about how racism has impacted their lives, and tap into being able to connect with us about bringing their voice.
Phyllis, you want to give them a look ahead? I'm happy to help in the conversation. So we've gotten through some of the common ground discussions. We've talked about the need for youth voices and the tools that will be needed. But as we think about January or February or post-release of this document, what might folks be on the lookout for?
Would somebody from the committee like to tap in?
Phyllis, this is Habiba, Chair Taylor. I guess to the point of where we see this work heading, if that's the question, beyond kind of an analysis of what we learn, I think ensuring that there's some for ongoing engagement with the community is something that I would foresee us in the beginning of the calendar year really supporting. The platform for that ongoing information gathering, and then the strategy for incorporating what we're learning in a continuous way. That's something that's on my mind.
Yeah, I would support that. Continuous surveying of the community, possibly even focus groups that go beyond this report, but just again, that this is not a one-time effort, that is a continuous feedback loop for us.
And the idea with each effort, we're gonna have learning, and as we gathered, we were able to see that the folks who had the interest, to jump on the calls were individuals during the workday. And so, that's a lot of people that we know who might already be civically engaged. So who are we missing? And how can we use our community contacts, nonprofit organizations who really have direct contact with the individuals we want to hear from. So really, from each event, we don't believe that we're done with the Common Grounds, the community conversations model, and that this is potentially something that we will do going forward. We just want to really pay attention to some of these other individuals that we haven't been able to connect with. So we don't want to lose momentum around what's happening in all around us, and we need to let them know that we're still working on this. So being transparent about all the work that we're doing is as important.
I think Chair Taylor, also some of the, one of the other things, Phyllis, I don't know if you want to go into it, that was discussed at the last subcommittee meeting was about having sort of those monthly forums that we talked about. And then the other thing also was sort of doing some sort of a public forum or public comment post-report being sent out to get sort of input from the report. So those were two other things that I had in my notes from your committee meeting. If you want to touch upon that.
Yeah, just a little bit about, we talked about having town hall type opportunities for folks to be able to bring their voice. I think my internet, I can't see you all anymore. Let's see. So the town hall meetings, and then also additional opportunities to get input from community members was discussed, going forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Phyllis. Any other questions for Phyllis or folks on the committee?
Chairman Taylor, I do have a question. I don't know if this falls under the Communications Committee, but perhaps it might be a good idea to assign it that way. I'm going back to the opening of this meeting and the fact that there were a pretty good number of public comments that came in. And I'm just wondering, we shouldn't allow those comments to just kind of fall by the wayside. I read through, it was quite voluminous. There were many that were just sort of airing concerns. There were some that were sort of asking questions, and we should come up with some type of a plan for how we sift through that information. To what extent we respond to some of those individuals. Do we, put out some sort of a statement? I don't know what the process is, but I think that if communications is a subcommittee, perhaps and I anticipate that we'll continue to get more of those kinds of responses from the general community. We should figure out a way, especially if Dean Anglin is willing to sift through the community conversations that we've had and distill it in a way that could be useful. Maybe he could even help with some of those as well. So just a thought, but I wouldn't want those to be sort of forgotten about.
Makes sense.
I think part and parcel of what you're saying is let's honor folks who've taken the time, right, in some ways to provide feedback in a way that shows we're being responsive, whether directly to them or through some other sort of response. So that's a good comment. Phyllis, any thoughts?
And I think we should be open to thinking about who else might be able to help us. We have had some outreach from organizational leaders like Legal Aid, who says, we have contact with individuals might there be an opportunity for us to offer support? And so we are running as fast as we can to also catch other already established, organizations who might be able to support us, like Dean Anglin, around this, the information that we're getting, and really making use of it. So I think, and I keep saying, there's definitely a sense of urgency around it, but there's definitely learning from every tactic or strategy that we have, and then deliver, and some reflection, and then a bunch of experts or smart people sitting around and figuring out the next way forward. I think our website, and maybe really looking at that as a way for people to also leave information, and then figure out some kind of way to let them know that we have it. And we are working to integrate it across our 4 themes. We're headed in we're thinking about that. We're headed in the direction of putting in the techniques, the tools to really get those things done.
I was just going to add real quick that updates to the website was definitely considered to allow people to be able to respond without necessarily having to respond face to face, which everyone may not feel comfortable with. So I think updates to the website where people can engage with each subcommittee is definitely something that our communication subcommittee is looking at. And as well as, and excuse me, Phyllis, if you've stated this before, looking at non-communicative ways to respond through possibly surveys and so forth will also be a mechanism that we'll be utilizing to, again, bring forth that voice, but not necessarily if people are not comfortable doing it face to face.
Yes, we did talk about that. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. So, but the takeaway really is, Rondell, let's find a way to make sure that every voice that wants to be heard is somehow represented in these discussions in some media, some form. So we will figure that out. It sounds to me, Phyllis, because you were the first to sort of say something in response to Randy's question, that this should reside in the communication subcommittee in some way. Now, it cuts across every committee, every subcommittee, right? Because they have their individual questions, but how we relay the information sounds like it has found a home. So
certainly, I got a good team. We're on it.
What? I'm sorry, Phyllis. What did you say?
I said we have a good team. We're on it.
Okay, no doubt. No doubt. All right,
Eddie.
Yes, sir.
Just one other point with respect to communications. I'm hoping, expecting that, and I think that's the committee's view, that there will be recommendations for initiatives coming out of this advisory committee. And there's almost always another side to things. So having been in this business, I know that no matter how perfect, we think what we've presented is, somebody has something else to say. So I would hope that there's an opportunity for others to also comment on what we're proposing here.
I I like that point. I want, and I don't think we have a lot of time to spend, but we should unpack what you're suggesting. But I don't know if these are contrary viewpoints, opposing viewpoints, or just an angle which you might not have seen, but I think it is important.
As an example, I know that there's been already discussion about some contracting changes that the county should be considering. And I've already gotten calls from some people who don't necessarily think we should be making contracting changes. So I'm just raising that as you should probably hear all the sides.
Got it. Yeah, that's a good one to point to, because I certainly understand why there are those who believe the process is good the way it is. And I'm sure there are other views that believe there's already an overreach with respect to contracting provisions. So no, that's certainly a good one.
I think that we have to keep in mind our goal and our focus here. And oftentimes, in my experience, I've seen the cases where, if it works for you, you don't want to change it. If you believe that it's going to take anything away from you, you don't want to change it. But change may be necessary for others to benefit. And I think, if we're serious about our goals here and we're serious about what we say we want to do, we may have to make some people uncomfortable with making changes that are not convenient for them. If we don't do that, I personally believe that we're going to be falling short of our goal, and we're going to have a situation where we're having constant discussion that doesn't amount to much, as has been stated in one of those comments. And I agree with Randall 100%. We have to acknowledge the comments, take note of them, and actually make effort to change what we say we're going to change. So I wanted to offer that to the group as well.
And I would say that I agree with you completely, but I guess my only point, and I believe this is what the county executive was after, we can acknowledge a different viewpoint, right, in our writing and in our discussion, but also indicate that our goals are pretty firm. While that viewpoint has its place, it still leads to outcomes which don't move the community forward, in our view. So in our view, acknowledging that input, we still believe differently, but I don't know that we can ignore it, right? Because that may not in and of itself be productive. So, I'm open to a different interpretation, but my view is that not acknowledging what might be a contrary position won't lead to the kind of dialogue that we're ultimately after. Okay. You're on mute, so I see the head shaking. So you're.
No, I am agreeing with you. We do have to acknowledge all comments, opinions, but I also believe that we have to stick to the goal, right? And just in my personal experience, I've seen where if it's not convenient for me to change things in order to better someone else, then I'm going to fight tooth and nail to keep things as they are. And I don't think that's what we're here for. So I want to make sure that while we're acknowledging, sometimes you have to have hard conversations, and sometimes you have to make decisions that are not necessarily convenient for a particular group of people, but and acknowledging that and knowing that we have to we set out. People can have their opinions, absolutely, and I think that we should welcome them and have dialogue around all opinions that are brought forth. But I just don't think that we should, kind of handcuff ourselves because a certain group of people things change. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Okay, so count me on board with that. Count me on board. We can delve into this later as well. I agree and accept that. All right, let's move on, unless there's another question for this group, for the subcommittee.
May I just take a moment and acknowledge that I believe Janice Contreras has joined the meeting, just so
Janice,
Letting
afternoon.
hanging out in the lobby for a little bit. So I apologize. I had a conflict, but I'm on board.
we're glad you're here now. Great.
Absolutely. All right, let's move to the Equitable Quality of Life Subcommittee. Mr. McShepard.
Okay, well, good afternoon again, everyone. I can say that our committee has been quite busy, and I have learned a lot about Cuyahoga County government. We have had conversations with the head of Public Works, the Director of Health and Human Services, the Director of Sustainability, the Chief Innovation Officer, and the COO of RTA. I've also had the privilege of joining India's committee to listen in on the public defender and the chief of public safety. And I would say, having been a part of all these conversations, just a few things come to mind. One, I appreciate the fact that it feels to me like these leaders are being very candid and open. I know some of that is owed to Naila and encouraging them to, don't hold back, be honest, be open. I think they're taking that message right on, and they are being very candid and I don't get the feeling that they're trying to hide anything. I think they're owning some of the shortcomings that are being brought to bear or brought to light. And they also seem to be open to suggestions. I even feel that in several of the discussions, we actually have come to some short-term solutions where the leader of these departments have sort of had this aha moment about, that would be a good idea, or that's something that we could do, or yeah, that's something we haven't thought about before. So already, I think they're getting a lot of the broader message that, it's easy to sort of overlook a lot of issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as a result of the spotlight being placed on these issues in their departments, and you start to ask questions about, the numbers of leaders in their respective departments that are of color, and whether or not they've had training and all these kinds of things, it really does tease out where there are areas of improvement needed. And I think that's really what the process is all about. We have left several of those meetings feeling like, we wish there were more time, but it's also encouraging to know that all the leaders have seemed open to having a continued conversation if we felt that that was necessary. That might be the case with some of these leaders in the future, but it's good to know that they're open to it. And the big takeaway for me is many of you will remember the first time we were together as a group, we talked about the fact that so many of these topical areas are interconnected in some form or fashion. That is really coming to light for me. Hearing a public defender, and then hearing someone from Health and Human Services, and then hearing a COO of RTA, and really starting to see how the puzzle sort of comes together and how so many of these are interrelated. And you really can't resolve a lot of these issues without looking at the bigger picture, which is why I like the fact that we are looking at all of these under these sort of themes, because I think it will drive our work in a very good way, and maybe shape some new ideas and some new approaches that hadn't been considered before. So I want to thank my small but mighty committee for the time they've given to this process. And I would encourage any of you that have the time to sit in on any of these discussions to do so. It is not a waste of time. Especially as a visitor, you don't have to ask questions if you don't want to, but sometimes just listening is really helpful, because you can sort of, in your own head, sort of process and take notes and sort of juxtapose what you've heard from that particular conversation against other conversations that we might be having. And for me, that's been very helpful. And I really do feel like we are getting at the heart of a lot of the challenges. The last thing I'll simply say is, our committee plans on continuing to move forward with a few more interviews. Based on some of the discussions, recommendations were made about other people that we might talk to. So we're now following up with some of those. And I'll just say that the point will come fairly soon, I would assume, that we as a group of subcommittees would need to sort of figure out what the next concentric circle would look like in terms of our outreach. Because remember, the recommendation here was that we start with county leadership. I mean, there's 1,000 people that we can talk to from all walks of life. And we sort of said, let's start with county leadership, at least to hear from the people that are driving the work every day, what their experiences are. And once we would have done that, we then maybe should talk about, obviously not today, but what does the next tier look like of individuals, organizations, communities that we might want to talk to that would help us to further understand the challenges at hand. So I'm excited, I'm inspired, I've learned a ton, and I appreciate the time that has been given to us by these county leaders. And again, their candor and their willingness to change. The retiring public defender, I mean, I think he has a little Baptist preacher in him. He was so fired up in his presentation, but it was very illuminating. It was very illuminating just to hear his perspective and the decades that he's been in the public defender business. So that is all I have to say. I would welcome anyone from my committee or anyone that has sat in on any of our committee meetings to weigh in with any additional thoughts.
I agree that it's been an enlightening experience, and it will make us stronger as council members when we get to the changes that we need to see, having heard and understanding how these systems work and where the interconnections meet, where the connections meet.
So while folks are thinking of other questions, Naila and Laura, to Randy's point about joining other committee discussions if you have time, it'd be wonderful. I don't know how much work is involved, but it sounds like I'm giving you more work. There's a sort of a master calendar of the subcommittee meetings that is owned by you and Laura at this point.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chair Taylor. We send that out. Laura.
Everyone gets every meeting?
Yes. Laura sends that out regularly. She sends it out. She's supposed to send it out weekly, which she does. But whenever there are additions or changes made, every member gets a copy of the calendar with the information. And we just ask that they let Laura know so that she can send them the Zoom invite. But everyone gets every meeting.
That's good. I didn't know if they were just meeting to me and then the committee chairs. Okay, great.
We send them to everyone.
Great.
See, we're getting one step ahead. We're knowing what you want before you want it.
Right. So Randy, I'd ask you in the committee, you came into this with, and now the writing still has to be done, with a certain hypothesis, right? A certain set of beliefs or thinking going into this work, and it's been illuminating as you described, and folks have been honest. Has anything changed in terms of your initial impression or the initial premise through these early discussions in your mind, especially? Again, not asking you to get to the conclusion, just wondering if things have been moved off their axis a little bit for you, or if it's about what you thought in terms of the responses.
Well, I mean, obviously there's a problem, and that's why we've all been assembled to participate in this work. And for me, it's just been abundantly clear that there are many disconnects and missed opportunities and, communication gaps. And perhaps not enough leadership discussion across the board on this particular issue, which of course this process will certainly help to address. But, all it takes is a few questions for you to know, and for the leaders, to their credit, to simply say, we've missed this. we haven't thought about this. We now that we've talked about it, I see where this could be improved. Or no, I haven't had the training, but I want to get to training. Or not enough of my people have gotten training. Or yes, I understand that, you know, cultural bias is something that, you know, we might be weak in. Or, you know, there's people owning up to the fact that as a result of our sort of asking questions, just in a, you know, very open way, not attacking, but just having the general conversation. I think that the leaders, just based on the questioning itself, you know, are starting to sort of see that, yeah, there are gaps. And I think for some of them, they immediately want to maybe move to at least short-term solutions, because it's becoming clear that there are areas that could be addressed if more attention might be paid, you know, to those areas. So no shocking revelations or anything, but certainly I think clarity around the fact that this exercise, this work is going to be really, really important. And that in my mind, the leaders are going to need to talk more consistently across lines to, you know, as we tease out what many of us have always said, that these issues are not vacuum issues. These are all connected in some way. And I think there might be steps that certain departments can take that help some of the other items that we're working on that they may not even realize today. But if they start to kind of connect, and if we can help tell those stories and help make the connections, I think it moves us where we want to go.
That is helpful. Thank you. Anyone else have questions or comments from any of the subcommittee members?
Before I stop, I just want to, I have to give Laura Black a shout out, because she is phenomenal. And I know Naila tells us that she's working too hard, but you know, I send her emails day and night, weekends. You know, I've asked her for, you know, could I join another committee meeting? It's always within minutes. You know, I get a Zoom link back, and, you know, so Laura, you're doing a great job, and we do appreciate and acknowledge that you are working hard for us.
Thank you. She says thank you because, of course, as you know, she's sitting with me in my office, so she says thank you.
Okay.
And Armin, if you're listening, she's not going anywhere, so you're not stealing her. She's a partner with me.
Oh, you never know.
All
Listen,
right.
Andy, it sounds like we're gonna have a lot of work, and you know, we might need additional help, Naila.
That's true.
Any other questions for the Equitable Quality of Life Subcommittee? Anyone else on the committee want to offer a comment? Okay. All right. We'll move on then to criminal justice. India.
So I think Randy pretty well summed it up. I think that with the criminal justice, we've had several conversations. Our focus is around juvenile and adult incarceration, talking to the county prosecutor and judges about policies and procedures, and then bail reform. And we've met with Judge Michelle Early, Anthony Body from the Bail Project, the Chief of Public Safety, Bob Corey, the County Administrative Judge, Brandon Sheehan, and as he mentioned, the County Public Defender, which I found that one of all of them to be the highlight for me, Mark Stanton. And then we have a couple more this week, at the end of the week, that we will follow up with, and then had to reschedule the sheriff, David Schilling. But, you know, this is a very complex issue, how the different judges, the courts, the prosecutors interact, and how each of them have different systems, policies in each of their offices. It's, you know, I left with, after several conversations, like, wow, we got our work cut out. And I think, Randy, what you said, you know, how do we all circle back to make sure that we're creating and looking at these policies and procedures, that it affects all the ecosystems and holistically, it's going to take a while. You know, I mean, this is, you know, there's no silver bullet to this work. And so, but I found everybody to be pretty much upfront, very enlightening, learned a whole lot about these systems that I just, you hear about and you just wonder, how does it work? And I think out of it, the bail project, it seems to be a desire to really move that not only to where it is, but take it to the next level, to the point, eventually we won't need it when the systems change. But right now, it's a very important initiative here in our county right now. I don't know if Reverend Chalker or Rabbi Caruso, you want to add anything?
I would just say, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. India, thank you for leading our team. And it's been good just getting to know each other, although I feel like we've just had all of these meetings, and I am looking forward to a time when we can process it all together. But I agree with you, India, about the Bail Pod project and how compelling that is, both hearing it from the point of a kind of an advocacy point of view with Anthony Body, but also hearing it from the folks on the other side and the people who are the judges and such. And one thing we've learned, and it's nothing novel, is that there is, it's a labyrinth to navigate. Someone who, is going through the process, has to put up bail, not just about the money, but also just about like navigating the system and having an advocate to help you navigate the system. The work that Anthony Body is doing is great, but it's just not enough. And so, we were thinking about it in the sense of you have a social worker at a hospital for a loved one, and that social worker helps you navigate, Medicare, Medicaid. It's almost as if, someone like that is needed in the system. I don't want to make it sound simplistic, and I know there are people who help with that, but it seems like we're sorely lacking for someone who finds themselves in the system to have some advocacy on how to navigate them, getting through from part to part, piece to piece, learning about it, being able to anticipate pitfalls in it. And once you get lost in the system, it's really hard if you don't have connections, if you don't know somebody, to extract yourself. So, but very revealing. Randy, we're glad you could join us for a few of the meetings. And I wish I was could be as ambitious as you and get to other meetings from other groups. But I'll try to do that if something piques my interest. But yeah, I feel like we're just beginning this process in a lot of ways. So I don't know if my colleagues want to share anything, but that's what I had to.
One thing I do want to add, and that we learned from Mark Stanton, was that a lot of the people that are in the bail project shouldn't even have it. It should be a personal bond. They shouldn't even have that. And then the number of juveniles that are bound over to the adult court that probably shouldn't be in the system at all. That was the two things that, really stood out, I think, as
right,
well.
Under $5,000, I think, should be just a personal.
Right.
Yeah.
And Reverend Chalker, did you want to add anything?
Well, like all that has been said, it is so complex. It's difficult to know where to begin. But I found it and have found it over the years disconcerting that there is such a discrepancy in let me use the words from Mr. Stanton, that too many of our judges do not have a backbone. And that creates so many problems in dealing with the persons that come before the bench. And I think it would really be important for our group to think about how we might recommend, and I'm not probably going to go anywhere, but what we might do to recommend a difference in how we elect judges or how judges serve on the bench in our county. And because I don't think it's just a county problem, it's one across the country when we elect persons to these positions, because the abilities, and that's not fair, not the abilities, I don't know that, but the manner in which some people come to the bench is not helpful.
Yeah, that piece there was astounding.
Other questions for India or the subcommittee?
Just like to mention that Cordell Stokes is part of our group as well, and he's been really valuable to have on board.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
India, this is Danielle. Question I have is some of the information and the shared, we've had conversations with, the current county prosecutor about some of this information. And I know he's on the list of individuals to be interviewed. I guess the work of this committee, and maybe we're not that far down the path yet, just to understand how we together that sometimes have conflicting views of where the changes need to happen in the system. And that's something that we're already at the stage of thinking about yet. But when we start to talk about bail and we talk about who should be personal bonded or not, this is something that has been, for the last at least couple of years has been pretty well discussed in the public. And I'm just curious how we resolve some of those differences here within the Equity Committee.
Well, I think that's, once we gather all the notes and have all our conversations, that's something, I can't tell you that today, I wouldn't begin to know. But I think once we look at the notes and then do some more investigation and try to figure out, where is their leverage, right? Who can we leverage to have these conversations? And going back to what Reverend Chalker said, a lot of them are doing things to keep their job. It's not about the people they serve, it's just to play it safe. If I let this person out, then my name end up in the paper if they do something wrong, that type of thing. So it's going to take a lot of work. And again, this is so complex that, but I do see some light at the end of the tunnel where I've heard 2 or 3 of our interviewees sort of on the same page around certain areas. And I think that's where we start.
Thank you.
So going back to the interconnectedness of this work, one of the things I'm curious about, India, and the rest of the subcommittee, when we think about workforce, talent pool, where does the justice system see that interacting with them? And could that be a lane where we sort of key in on, and how do we sort of connect the two and make sure there's more fluidity there and conversation and not as siloed? So that's one of the things that I'm interested in.
And I guess we haven't, had that conversation, but, in 1 or 2 of our conversations, there are certain individuals that ensuring training of their staff on a regular basis, that is doing some of the racial equity work is not consistent across the board. So when I hear about, 1 or 2 offices doing this and the other ones aren't, my question is, how do you institutionalize that and make it standardized across all the systems? Which then gets into HR and workforce and the hiring and who comes into these positions, and definitely need more diversity in all of these, the ones we've interviewed across the system.
That connectedness or the interconnectivity certainly is an important question. We'll tease out, to Randall's word earlier, tease out some of that when we hear from Peter Hoffman a little bit, but there's clearly more work to do there. All right, if no other questions for India, Heidi, Health and Healthcare Subcommittee.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chair Taylor. So our committee met last week, and we have had several interviews, and we have more scheduled. And I feel like Randy was describing my summary of our subcommittee actually when you were summarizing yours, which I think is actually a really good thing. We're all kind of coming back to some real fundamental issues, which is the interconnectedness of these issues and the systems that are designed for the outcomes that we see, which we need to address. We need to fix the systems, redesign them so that we're getting equitable opportunity. But the interconnectedness is something that I'm really wrestling with. Just this morning, for example, we had an interview where we discussed, again, back to criminal justice reform. And this was related to behavioral health and somewhat physical health and the issues of diversion programs and other opportunities and the disparate way that sentences are given and the way people are charged, before the sentences. So there are so many pieces here that continue to overlap. And I think that's critically important. And we're going to have to work together really to figure out how we do that. And I do think that a lot of the work that we've been working on, the systems mapping, which you'll hear about in a few minutes, can help us see, each of us see ourselves in that work a bit of the bigger picture and where those connections are. So where the lenses that we each bring with our subcommittee, but also those people we interviewed, those perspectives about where change can actually happen. And I think India had said, there's some people that you interviewed who are on the same page about a few issues. Maybe that's where we start. And I think we have to kind of balance where we see the leverage points being possible, right? Where is it timely, where people maybe have the political will, the social capital, whatever it is, to make change now versus the things that are going to take us a little bit of time to get at a little bit further down the road. So those things have all been really key for me in sitting on some of the other interviews for other subcommittees and then the ones for our own. The other thing is I'm struggling a bit with a number of the things that have come out in our interviews have also, I think also in some of the other subcommittees that I've sat in, similarly, we have a sphere of influence at the county level. That's where we were appointed by county council. We have the support of the county executive, but we don't necessarily have the ability to give recommendations at the state or federal level that are going to change things. Yet, so much of what we're hearing about at the county level here is heavily influenced by state and federal policy or other pieces that flow through funding and other things. So I'm struggling with the tension of the recommendations we can actually put forth to make change at the county level versus where is the root issue somewhere a little bit at a higher level, and what is our role in thinking about how that impact is affecting the people that we're trying to address here. So that's one of the other takeaways for me that I've been thinking a lot through. And then we also, and I think this is probably true for others, but in health, there are a lot of external partners that are not in this first round of interviewing. So going back again to something Randy said earlier is, when do we begin to involve that next layer of folks? Because we could interview thousands of people. So where is that high level next circumference of folks that we need to get some interviews about? So our team talked about our hospitals, all 5 hospital systems in our community, and engagement at the highest level, CEO levels there. And when we do that, when is the timeline for that? So, we're still thinking through those issues as well, but I wanted to bring them to the whole group. So I think those were the main issues I wanted to bring up. I just really echo the things that I heard from Randy and from India as well. And of course, Levine or Eddie, I know Sheila couldn't be with us this afternoon, but she was with us this morning. If there anything else from our subcommittee or others who joined, I know Habiba joined us for interviews as well, please feel free to jump in as well. Thank you.
I just wanted to add real quick that this is a very complex topic or issue that really touches on a multitude of entities. So we automatically think of healthcare as looking at the hospitals per se. And of course, we definitely want to focus on patient trust and response to patients. But I think it also deals with those entities that touch on renewal of insurance, especially Medicaid. If individuals can't get their Medicaid renewed, then they can't seek out healthcare. So I think we need to look at those entities, and then also looking at the stigma behind mental health in the African American community. How do we deal with that? How do we put aside that stigma so that more people can get treated for mental health issues in our community, as opposed to self-medicating or doing other things, acting out behaviors we really want to look at some of those key issues that really affect our African American population as we talk about healthcare, and how can we really move the needle on trying to make change where there is a removal of that stigma. So those are kind of some of my thoughts as a result of this committee.
Thank you so much, Lavina. And I just wanted to tie one thing that you said back to something we discussed this morning, was that the issue of insurance is not just tied to people receiving services, but it's also tied to other budgets that are then able to be used for prevention and other higher level services that aren't direct service provision for what could be covered by Medicaid. So that's yet another layer of this that that you have raised. So thank you so much, and welcome anybody else too.
Okay, we will we'll hear more from Heidi in just a moment as well. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Armin.
Okay, I would just add, you know, everything is intertwined, as you're finding, and the state and federal levels are critically important. And I would encourage you to, as you do your work, to let us know what changes would be needed in your view. We do actively lobby on issues that impact people in the county. We lobby with our state legislators. We lobby with our federal legislators. We lobby with federal administration. So anything that you come up with in those categories that impact county residents, we would be very interested in. And, you know, I can't guarantee we'll be able to make the change, but we'll certainly work on it. And dealing with the outside organizations or you know, people, you know, you're already starting to do that by working with the courts and the prosecutor and others. And, you know, again, it's all integrated. And again, you know, I encourage you to do that. And, you know, we'll continue. We work well. We're well coordinated with others. And as you pinpoint areas that need work, we'll do that. I'm going to have to drop off, by the way. I have another 3:30 call, so 2:30, whatever it is. So thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you for your time and attention. Appreciate it. And for the indication that you're right, lobbying is a part of what you do at county government for not just residents here, but the applications can be broader. So thank you for that reminder. All right, Stephen.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. First, I just want to thank Chair Taylor for your leadership. You know, just to echo your comments about Marcia earlier on, and you know, the type of leader she is and what she brings to the table. And you know, personally honored that you know you and Marcia and the team feel that I could step into this role and move this work forward, which is extremely critical. You know, also to the county, Nyla, Laura, always being available, you know, helping to get me up to speed in a week or so. So certainly appreciate that. And then, you know, subcommittee team members, you know, I'm trying to be as, you know, responsive as possible, making sure you're in the loop and connected to this work, and that we're aligned as we move forward. So right now, to the committee, you know, we're just scheduling meetings. So I think our first meeting is tomorrow. And then we have a few more, I believe, this week. So we're going to be meeting with the Chief of Economic Development, Business Officer, Chief of Economic Growth and Opportunity Officer, by the suggestion of Nyla, Laura, and the county team, the Director of Procurement. I think given the brief discussion on sort of being open to others' opinions and thoughts, I certainly think that's something we'll have to recognize as a potential sensitive spot, right, for a lot of folks that currently do business with the county. A couple others, the Workforce Director, and then recognizing the interconnectedness, at least getting some of the transcripts from the meeting earlier on today from RTA. I think that's going to be really important to our work as well. So don't want to add too much. Certainly if my team members want to share sort of their interests and what they want to see with this or have any other comments, feel free.
Okay. And unless there are comments, I believe I know the answer from Stephen's subcommittee to my question, which is to the committee chairs and anyone on the committee. We have suggested that we're going to try to have a draft of this initial report done in early December. Let's call it early to mid-December. So the question really is, where are you right now in terms of your level of anxiety, right, with respect to not only collecting information and being able to have something started with respect to the report, because we want to be able to help where these check-ins are necessary. We'll do them as small groups, but I'm sure everyone on this call right now is also willing to pitch in where they can. So it's not necessarily a fair question, but I am curious where you are, where you stand with respect to that. If you're optimistic, great, because you think you're far enough ahead and you've got an outline in your head. If you do have anxiety, that's also worth talking about just briefly as well.
Yeah.
So, as I said, we can pitch in.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a certain level of anxiety that already exists with this work. I think that coming in behind, a bit behind, presents anxiety, but I think that given how the county has responded in helping us to schedule, my team members, Yanila, Habiba, everyone else in responding to their availability, as long as we could get most of the meetings done this week, I think I feel at least comfortable that we can get you something by that time frame.
How about you, Randall?
What was the exact question? I'm sorry.
Do you feel like you're on pace, right, to be able to get something reduced to writing in the next several weeks? Again, we're trying to offer. I'm just trying to make sure that folks are feeling good about where they are, and if that's not the case, then where we might help.
Well, anxiety is an interesting word. I guess I wonder when you say you want something in writing, because obviously all these interviews, we have note takers. So I guess I want to be clear. Are we as subcommittees to sort of go back through all of the notes from all of the meetings and try to summarize all that we would have heard in the form of a document? And if so, like, are we talking a couple pages or more? Because that will determine whether or not I have a level of anxiety or not.
Okay, well, I didn't know what I was getting into when I asked the question. I thought it was needed. So yeah, that's an important question. And then after we hear from Heidi and perhaps India, then let's talk about it just briefly. Heidi.
Well, let me just say one other thing, though, going back to what Heidi said and what the county executive said, because I was sort of ruffling through trying to find the resolution. And as a part of the December 31, 2020 deliverable, one of the things that is clearly noted under item E under section 3 is that we are to help develop and advocate for a legislative agenda at the local, state, and federal levels of government to help end racism and improve the public health crisis that currently exists for Black people. So I think that to the point that was made, we should be, and I've asked some of those questions about what could be done at a policy level, and some have offered some ideas, but I think it's maybe not our place to establish it, but I think we could certainly illuminate, here's 4 or 5 areas that clearly require some heavy advocacy at the state and federal level if we want to see change, because you can only get so far with what the county can afford to do. I just wanted to add that point. Sorry, Chairman.
Okay, no, that's good. Thank you. Heidi?
Yeah, so I didn't present this in my subcommittee report out, but I pulled together a lot of documents about the community health assessments that have been done since 2015 through 2018 through 2019, and also a series of interviews and a bunch of public health and hospital data that have been put together. And so for me, I feel pretty good about describing the problem. It's when we begin to, and I think with the help of the system mapping that we're going to look at in a minute, I feel better that we're getting at the place where we can begin to identify the intersections. and potentially begin to identify those leverage points for this initial write-up. But where I think I need some additional help in framing the writing pieces is really around, maybe it's the subcommittee chairs that meet together in a smaller group and put our heads together around what level we're talking about, because I think there's this initial level of situational awareness, beginning to understand all of these pieces that we've just gotten a crash course on around county government and how it works and where the systems are, and then understand what do we expect in this first report beyond just describing the problem, and then where are we headed strategically over the coming, the subsequent months. So that to me would be helpful for writing, because I feel like I've got enough to begin, at least from my lens, to start to describe this. And then I've been trying to understand where everybody else's pieces are. But there's this other piece of what is the scope of what we're doing here? And I think I would more err on not synthesizing the interviews for the purposes of having a document that synthesizes them, but more using what's been written up in the Common Ground and the interviews and other sources of data to allow us this bigger synthesis to describe the problem where we currently sit and where we're heading. But I really want to make sure that's the understanding other folks have about where we are right now.
Okay, that's fair. India, I'm not sure if you're still able to join us.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
So
given what, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree that, because I keep in my head asking, what is it that we're producing at the, in December? And then what is the framework that we're going to use to, really talk about what we do in 2021 to begin to tackle the collective issues? That's where, I keep trying to think through what is this, not just a report, right? Not just here's the issue, but what are the issues that we can tackle, and what are some of the potential opportunities and solutions to bringing all this together? And again, it's really complex when I look at all the different areas we're all working in, because it's all interrelated.
Okay, so I appreciate those comments and the feedback, and if others have thoughts, given what they've heard, that's great. I just want us to keep saying this out loud, right? Because we do know that there is a product due, and what it looks like, this first version, is up to us, right? It's up to us, it's each and every one of us. So, but we need to keep saying it out loud so that we are firm in our heads that there is something due, but we can remake it, recraft it, and perfect it, or make it better over the course of time. But just stating the obvious again, I just want to make sure that we don't lose that frame of reference. Naila, anything before we move on?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, so I'm going to quickly talk about the conversation we had just yesterday, I believe, with the folks who are working internal to the county with their equity commission, and they're examining just that, the internal workings of the county. That includes employees and others around these issues of equity. A good conversation. Ted Carter, along with David Merriman and some other folks that we will, you've talked to and will hear from.
Lenora Lockett.
Lenora, and there was at least one more, I thought.
Well, it was David Merriman, Ted Carter, and Lenora Lockett are the three co-chairs of the County Equity Commission. And also joining us on that call was Matt Carroll, who is Chief Economic Growth and Opportunity Officer, as well as Kari Morales, who is an Economic Program Manager with TED, who works with TED.
Okay, so two things really as output. One, as I committed to TED, before our writings go out to the public, because they're working on a parallel effort, he will see the advanced version, because they have a report due at the end of January. And our work will help inform, I imagine, given what I committed to, help inform their work. And as we all said yesterday, this is a collaboration. There's a separate path being pursued right now, but in the end, these things have to come together for the good of the county, not only for the employees, but what we're trying to do from an external standpoint. The second thing is, there was a suggestion that perhaps their folks should listen in on our conversations. We didn't go the other direction with respect to the interviews. And ultimately the decision has been, let's keep these interviews confined and contained to our subcommittees and members of this Equity Council for now. We will have a discussion with the county co-chairs if they would like, separate and apart from our interviews, but just know that we're going to keep these separate paths going just for now, unless folks feel differently about it. But we want the intersection to occur when appropriate. Just an FYI, and this is largely procedural and process oriented, but I thought it was important enough to put it on the agenda so that you could hear that there has been outreach. Any questions on that? All right. So, Peter, if you're still around, you've managed to hang in there.
Yeah.
And it might be necessary at some point to have him share a screen, if that's possible.
Yeah.
Laura, yep, there you go.
Very good. So thank you very much, Chairman Taylor and members of the council. So I'm going to just briefly provide an overview of what we've been doing with the systems mapping in terms of, and working with the core modeling team, and then also open it up for questions. And I'm happy at any, if folks have questions, I'm happy to set up separate meetings and so forth and talk with folks. Just as a brief overview, it might help to think about the systems mapping in the context of this iceberg metaphor for systems thinking, where we think about the events that we're seeing as being on the surface and what's visible. This is a lot of the attention in the media, but below the surface are the underlying patterns and trends. And we get that from stories and looking at data and analyzing that. And then below that is the structure. So when we're talking about structural racism, for example, there's a structure behind that. That's a lot of what John Powell's work has talked about. And then below that are the values, attitudes, norms, mental models. And when we think about some of the mental models that are underneath redlining as a policy and practice, it informs the structure, which generates the patterns, and that's the events. So we think about from a systems thinking, using this iceberg metaphor, there's a causal influence that's pushing up, but of course the events, they also shape behaviors, expectations, and norms in a community. So these are going back and forth. And one of the main goals of the systems mapping is really to understand what this structure might look like. And the values, norms, mental models that informs it, and also what patterns of behavior that might generate. So we have a terrific actually history here in Cleveland about understanding structural racism, in particular from a systems perspective. Some of this goes back to previous documents on regionalism that was commissioned by the President's Council, and more recently a History Matters report that was, both of these were by Kerwin. And then with this council and the testimonies, these are public meetings, so that's another data source. And then most recently, we have started a series of group model building workshops as part of a cross-sector innovation initiative that Heidi has mentioned a couple of times. And additionally, we've also talked about the common ground conversations, which were just completed, and the themes are being pulled out, subcommittee interviews that you're doing, and then other data we can pull in. Before I go into the systems mapping, Heidi, do you want to say a little bit about this project, because you've mentioned it a couple of times?
Sure. So late in 2018, early 2019, we were eligible to apply for funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to create a project that would look at how to catalyze systems change. And we were able to do that because we had done a community health assessment, and that involved most of our hospital systems and all of our health departments. And so this was something that was offered nationally, and we were very grateful to receive one of the few awards. And so this work really was about creating a systems map on structural racism in Cuyahoga County. And so we have a core modeling team that has been working on this. And so what Peter is going to present is our collective work, which just so happens to be around the same issues that we're addressing on the case. And that core modeling team in the first phase of this work, which has been in 2020, is Greg Brown from Policy Bridge, Andrea Lyons and Ben Millidan from the United Way, Angela Newman-White from the Board of Health, but also from the Ohio Equity Institute, focus on infant mortality in particular, Nichelle Shaw and Martha Halko, also from the Board of Health, Patricia Tersniak from the Center for Health Affairs, which is the Regional Hospital Association, and Dolores Collins, who's the president and CEO of Vision of Change, the founder. So that is the core modeling team for this phase one, and the group that has come together for a series of sessions to create the model you're going to see, which is just the beginning. And then the phase two will be a much more broad community engagement of all of the sectors each of those leaders represents to further identify causal loop pieces of the diagram that are not there, as well as additional leverage points and solutions. So I wanted you to understand who the people were that were working on this. And also the idea here is that we begin to see the interconnectedness, sort of circling back to what I said a few minutes ago. We're all seeing that and we're feeling it in the interviews and the data that we're looking at, but seeing it visually has helped me a lot in understanding where we might focus our time and our attention in the short term, but also in the longer term.
Great, thank you. So to set this up, I'll introduce a series of conventions. So when we talk about seeing a system, there's a set of conventions from system dynamics, and I'll draw out a piece of structure just to introduce the terms. So we think about impact of policies. Historically, when the impact of the policies have actually they've been weak or not making a positive impact on structural racism, that's led to this policy of racism as a public health crisis declaring it. So the link here represents a causal connection. The double line represents that it takes time. And the minus sign here indicates that when the policies are ineffective, then we're pressing for having racism as a public health crisis declared as a policy. And this contributes, within this map, we have the policies has a link here to quality of education that's coming out of the declaration. It's a dashed line right now, just simply because it's not something that has been implemented yet. So this is an idea. The quality of education impacts diversity of leadership. So higher quality of education, more diversity in leadership. And more diversity of leadership leads to greater focus on systems policies, which increases impact. So this is an example of a feedback loop. And it's a balancing feedback loop, because if you have an initial decrease in the impact of the policies, it feeds back and counteracts that by leading to an increase. So this is a response of part of the system.
Peter, I have a quick question. I'm sorry.
Second.
When you say quality of education, can you expand on what you mean by education in this example?
Actually, yeah. So in this particular map that I'll be showing you, it's actually pretty broad. It's across, it's not just primary, secondary. It's also thinking about developing workforce training. I'll show you an example. But right now, it's a pretty broad concept, not just K through 12 or higher education. Greater diversity of leadership leads to, we've talked about influence of values as being important, and that feeds back to reinforced diversity of values. So this is an example of a reinforcing feedback loop, where if there's an initial increase in diversity of leadership, it'll reinforce that effect through influence of values. So they're basically, in system dynamics, there are two kinds of feedback loops: balancing loops and reinforcing loops. There isn't some other kind of feedback loop. They have two types of behaviors. So reinforcing loops are associated with exponential growth or decline, like this. And balancing loops are associated with goal-seeking increase or decline in this sense. And they're not good or bad. It depends on whether you want something to increase or decrease that determines whether it's desired or not. So this is the diagram, and I'll have the key here for some of the conventions just for reference, which are in the slides that just distributed. So this is the overall system map. This is really from 2 sessions, about maybe a total of 45 to 50 minutes of working time each from the CSII project that Heidi mentioned. And there are 5 major sectors here. We have criminal justice. The criminal and juvenile justice system is a variable down here. So building on the earlier points, you can obviously go into great detail and map out how this whole system is working, but it's also functioning within a larger context. We have equitable quality of life. So what I did was just to map where some of the subcommittees may be landing. And in here, we have things like property ownership, transgenerational stability, wealth equity, community conditions, investment communities, economic opportunity in the structure that even though we started with focusing on structural racism and health, very quickly we're pulling in things like tax-based property, education, quality of education, and to get at your point, Victor, here's lifelong learning, stackable certificates as a way of increasing employment opportunities. So thinking again about broader education. Health and healthcare as a sector. And earlier there was a mention of trust and the importance of that for outcomes. So there's actually a trust variable up here. And there wasn't a clear name for this. There are 4 subcommittees for CASE. In our map, there's actually a whole set of structures that are provisionally called perspective transformation, which is sort of worth noting. So this is the overall system map as it currently exists. The next steps are to continue to elaborate this and begin to map in solutions. And then also to the extent that people want to have more conversations at the level of subcommittees, certainly pull in the interviews, the common ground conversations to elaborate this. And this can either be unpacked and become something more detailed or rolled up in sort of a higher level strategic map. But this is helping potentially see where there may be some connections created, as well as where there might be some innovative solutions that are identified, and seeing how multiple solutions are being working together. And this is, of course, a working draft.
Peter, can I just add that you actually went back and looked at those historical documents that you highlighted a couple slides ago and encoded the documentation in those historical documents that were specific to Cuyahoga County, which were also part of some of the smaller pieces of this. So this is overwhelming. And if you're not used to the conventions of the way the system map is drawn, it can be confusing. But what we wanted folks to see today was that this is grounded in Cuyahoga County historical context and the lived experience, which has been brought out through these group model building sessions, and that this isn't exhaustive, but we can begin to start to see the connections and where we may be able to leverage specific points of impact.
In the slides that were sent out, there were some extra slides that talk about, for example, economic opportunity, criminal justice system, equitable quality of life, and healthcare. These are all examples of things that come from the documents, but not the earlier, and not the larger map that I just shared.
Peter, if you could go back to that example for healthcare, I just want to pause for a moment, have Heidi, because we went through this earlier with Stephen. And look, I know folks that your eyes are probably glazing over when you read this because there's so much to take in. But as I've said to Naila and Laura, and to a degree Heidi, while always a believer in systems thinking and mapping, this takes it to a new level for me, right? Because I've always had it more simply presented. But it is important. After I looked at this in fuller detail over the weekend, all these connections make sense. How we use it is up to us, or don't use it. But I think it's a good foundation builder for a lot of the work that is about to happen. So Heidi, in about 2 minutes, could you just walk through your example from health and healthcare?
Sure. So again, this is not exhaustive, but what this does is illustrate in visual format that there are a number of different impacts or drivers on health outcomes. So if we look at the far left here, you can see distribution, toxic release sites, and particularly in this community, that has led to significant lead exposures. And that has impacted child and infant health outcomes. And in a bigger map, that would also link to educational outcomes and potentially other downstream pieces. But in this simple example, if you just look at how a toxic exposure can impact health, we then look at the impact on life expectancy, impact on infant mortality, the impact of lead exposure, transgenerational, so on a mother and then on to her fetus. If you look also at the toxic distribution release sites here, you see that there's also an impact on chronic disease. In this particular map, this is again based on historical documents from Cuyahoga County, we do see that there are a number of environmental exposures that lead to an increased risk of diabetes. That's coupled with one's genetics and other things. But if you just look at the system in the context of the environment, that leaves people more susceptible to diabetes, which then impacts their well-being and their life expectancy. And that well-being is psychological, but also physical. And there are a lot of pieces in here that you could also add in around well-being related to employment, related to mental health and substance abuse, like we talked about in our subcommittee interview earlier today. But what we want you to see is you can begin to start in concrete ways, see how these begin to link to one another. And then where is it that we can actually intervene? Where is it that we can start to look at in a short time frame and then in the longer time frame? Where can we make some impact? And so in this example, hopefully you can begin to see it, since this chronic disease is so prevalent in our community, and we see differences in life expectancy and infant mortality for people of color, which are what we call in public health inequities. Their disparities are differences. That's a description. Inequities are things that are preventable, avoidable, and unjust because the result of a system. And that system can be impacted and changed. So that's what we're trying to represent here.
Peter, just in this case, take us through the reinforcing loop 1 to show how this is things.
So in this one, if you had a increase in life expectancy, so that goes up, the plus sign here would indicate that you would also have an increase in psychological well-being, which contributes to well-being. And that feeds back into increasing life expectancy. And that's a reinforcing loop. That's working as a virtuous cycle. If you had a decrease in well-being or decrease in psychological well-being, it would start to work. This feedback loop would start to work as a vicious cycle. So the trick is often how to get those vicious cycles to become virtuous cycle in the case of a reinforcing loop.
Great. That's very helpful. Any other slides you want to get to, Peter?
No, I'm just conscious of time. So if folks have questions.
Well, just flip through what remains, and then that way they can see it. And then
I think that's pretty much it.
Oh, that's it? Okay, you did. Okay.
These are extra slides that were in the doc.
Got it. All right. So folks, I get it. A lot in there, and when at first glance, perhaps overwhelming, but we're gonna try to reduce this to chunks, right? And hopefully those chunks allow us to get our arms around, our heads around what this all means. Its importance has grown on me, quite honestly. And while none of us, other than maybe a few folks on the line, Heidi and Peter in particular, will become experts in it, I think if we can, once again, frame our thinking around these cycles, this mapping, it will help the work, not just short term, but long term, because what we want to do is leave an imprint, right? We want to find a way to have this document last beyond, so the writing will improve over time, the thinking will improve over time, and hopefully the outcomes will improve over time if we ground ourselves in a way of thinking. So I will stop there, and if there are any comments on this particular document, please offer them.
Eddie, I'm sorry, did I mishear? Did you say that this was emailed out, or?
I don't know if it went to everyone, but you will have, you can get it today. right, Laura, right?
Yes, she'll send it. It just went to the subcommittee chairs, Eddie. You just said to send it to the chairs initially.
Yeah, just
So-
because I didn't want to overwhelm the discussion, so you'll get it today.
I will send it out.
And take a look. All right, any other thoughts on it before we move on?
I think each particular area that we're involved in, it'd be interesting to take that mapping, just to take one particular issue with and really make it a micro experiment, because certainly I'm visually overwhelmed. But I'm also incredibly intrigued. So it would be really an interesting exercise for each group to sort of take an issue area within their particular area of investigation and to follow it along, and maybe to have somebody lead us through that at some point. And then we can decide whether it would be of great use to us. So, but thank you, Peter, for all this work.
Yeah, great.
I'm going to offer the same thing conceptually, right? This has great import, right? If we can find a way to use it, but more than that, thank you so much, Peter, for putting the time and energy and expertise into getting us to this point. As I said, I'm a convert, right? In a number of new ways around this thinking. We just have to figure out its application to our work so that it has meaning and it's not just taking away from. It won't take away, but if you have to learn it, then that's just time expended on something new to learn. But I bet we can do both things at once. So again, a great deal of appreciation for the work, time, and energy you put into this as well, Heidi. Thank you so much. All right. That's it. That's all the dose of systems thinking mapping you get today, right? And it's probably too much for some of you. Just quickly on a report to County Council, I've said to Naila, I will take the first report out of County Council when and if we have that conversation. But I've said to all of you, we will share in this work over the course of time. Naila, what more do you want to add to that?
I just wanted you to add that it should be on your schedule, that you're actually going to do that on November 17th. But
so it's on my schedule. I'm gonna do it
it's on your schedule. We've spoken to Kelly about it, and I believe it's on there.
Then we're all set. After they hear from me, the amateur, then they'll hear from you guys subsequently about the work that we're doing as a report to County Council. Any other thoughts or comments? Good discussion today, folks. I do appreciate it. Thank you once again to each and every one of you who stepped up with your time, your expertise, to the subcommittee chairs. A job well done, each and every one of you. So much to do, but man, I'm encouraged by where we are. So I mean it when I say I'm grateful. Anyone else? Anything?
Well, the only other item I have is when are you thinking for the next meeting? Are you thinking after the Thanksgiving holiday, the week of the 30th? Are you thinking before, or what is your preference, Chair Taylor?
I'd love to have this group talk before the first draft, whether it's 2 pages to Randall's point or something already assembled, largely given what Heidi said. But I'd love us to talk, even if it's not a 2-hour discussion, as a sort of a way to check in with one another to make certain we're again comfortable with where folks are. So if that's before Thanksgiving, fine. I realize it's just a few weeks away. If it's just after, that's fine as well. Just know that puts us up against that time frame, and it's not artificially created. I think if we can get a first week in December early report out, buy ourselves some time before we begin to clean up some language. So I didn't answer your question, but I'm hoping 2.5 weeks is possible. If not, we're at the end of November, first week in December.
Mr. Chair, can we also consider or talk about maybe having this as a recurring meeting at the same day and time? I think the amount of time we spend scheduling the next one, I think is difficult. And if we just agreed on the same day time of the month, we might make it easier.
Okay. I'm agreeing. Yes, I'm okay with that. It's just we have an urgency around some things now. So we'll probably have to do a doodle or some other instrument to figure out the next best 2 times. But after the start of the year,
that's right.
I'm 100% in agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
all right.
would you like me to look?
Pardon
I
me?
apologize. I was just going to ask, would you like me to look at a doodle poll sort of starting like the end of the week of the 16th to do it before Thanksgiving, or which would you prefer?
I'd prefer both, right? If you could do the doodle poll the end of the week, beginning of the 16th, see what sort of response we get, and then do a second two or three time option just after Thanksgiving.
Okay. Will
That's
do.
double the work, Clerk Bird, but thank you.
Will do.
All right. And if we can only get the co-chairs together and then anyone else who can join, I'm sorry, the chairs together and anyone else can join. We don't want to leave anyone out, but we'll do what we have to make sure that we're on pace, as I mentioned. All right, folks. Anything else for the good of the order? It's at 3 o'clock. I know we're a minute after. Riley, you want to adjourn us?
Yeah, unless there's no further business to discuss, I will adjourn this meeting. Again, I thank you very much for your dedication and commitment to this very extremely important work. For those of you I do not see before the Thanksgiving holiday, I wish you all a safe and happy Thanksgiving. To the subcommittee co-chairs, I know I will see you all before Thanksgiving, but if for some reason I don't, I wish you the same. Eddie, I know I will talk to you and see you a lot before Thanksgiving, so I will hold off.
Here we are. Here we are. Thank you all so very much. Appreciate
you.
your time.
Thank you.
Everyone take care.